Welcome to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough, the Parenting Through Challenges podcast. I am your host, Angie Grant, and today I want to dig in again to what happens when we yell at our kids. And I want to start this episode by being so clear that I'm not talking about this because I think you're a bad parent or I think that I'm a bad parent. I talk about this because I I know that changing these ancestral cycles of the way that we react for most of us isn't about just hearing once or twice or even 10 times that we shouldn't yell at our kids. What I think is that hearing something a different way, hearing that thing that really gets at the core is sometimes what we need to break that cycle. Because I don't know about you, but I know a ridiculous amount of things about parenting and behaviors and trauma and attachment and so many things about developmental disabilities and delays and diagnoses, right? My mind is full and my bookshelves are full of information, a ton of information. And yet, when in the moment, we all are positioned, conditioned, trained, if not hardwired to react, even when our mind knows that that isn't what is best for our kids' development. So I want to break down what's really happening with our kids, what's really happening with you, and some really key practical things that you can start doing about it. So, like I said, I know that you probably know a lot of this, but I'm going to say it anyways, because there are things that I have listened to over and over and over again, and it isn't until that 10th time. I mean, it even happens when we watch movies, not when we're, learning new concepts, but we can watch the same movie 10 or 20 or 40 times and still see something new every time. And each time that we talk about behaviors and consequences, each time that we talk about it and you hear it, you're a different person. So let's talk about our kids. Our kids, all humans, are born with a blueprint of who you're meant to be. And all of our blueprints are very unique. I look at that blueprint through the lens of human design. There are other ways to look at it as well, but I use human design. I think it's a beautiful way to show you energetically who you're designed to be, how you're designed to play with energy, to interact with others, to love, to show up. So I think that that gives us some really powerful insights into who you're meant to be, who your kids are meant to be. And also, as humans, we are born to love and be loved. We're born to feel a sense of belonging. We're born to be valued for who we are. We're born to feel empowered. But relatively quickly, even in the best parenting situations, there are things that can happen along the way that can veer us off of our blueprint, off of our path, off of our purpose. And I think that one of those things is when we as parents lose our cool with our kids. And again, I'm not saying this to be blaming, but when we yell at our kids, when we dole out consequences to our kids, it has the power to veer our kids off their path. Because let's think about this, right? And I'm not talking about your child is running out into traffic, right? Yell at them. That is a great time to yell at your kids because their life is in danger. I'm talking about the losing our cool when our kids aren't behaving the way that we want them to. I'm talking about the losing our cool when our kids are maybe being more impulsive than we want them to or expect or than we can handle. I'm talking about when we lose our cool or give our kids consequences, when what if, in fact, they're living out their design, they're living out their energy in a way that feels right to them, but to us, it feels wrong. It feels like they're misbehaving because they're not us. I was talking with a friend today who, as an adult, she has ADHD, and she was talking about exploring this idea of what if what we call ADHD is in fact a manifestation of your design? These are things that I've talked with her about quite a bit before, is that the type of being a manifesting generator can look to the rest of the world who isn't that type, can look like ADHD. Or having a third line profile to those who don't have a third line profile can look like impulsive, reactive, not well thought out behavior. But it isn't well thought out behavior because it's not supposed to be, because somebody with a third line is energetically designed to learn through trial. They're not designed to learn through sitting down and absorbing information. That's for the first lines. But the third lines are designed to learn through doing. And and they're not designed to learn through doing it the right way the first time. They gain their knowledge base through doing it the wrong way, or what some could call the wrong way, over and over again. And so imagine as a parent not knowing that about your kiddo, and they're, just diving right in to do the thing at 2 years old or 3 years old. They're just diving right in without being given instruction first, without maybe seeking permission first. As a parent, that can feel like our kids are being disrespectful or defiant or impulsive. And it can be easy as a parent to want to jump to either figuring out what kind of diagnosis they need to understand their behavior, or and also it can also mean giving them consequences for behaving in a way that doesn't jive with you. But what happens when we do that? When our third line kiddos, as an example, right? And there are so many parts of our design, but I want to use this as a way to highlight what I'm trying to share, is that when we give feedback to our kiddos who have a third line in their profile, that they need to stop and slow down and think before they act. And when we give them punishments or consequences for making mistakes, because that mistake seemed like a problem to us, essentially what we're saying is, don't be you, be like me. Essentially what we're saying is that the energy that you feel that's a part of you, that is how you are designed to learn, don't listen to that. Don't honor that. I really want that to sink in, and not in a shameful way, but when we know more about what our kids need energetically, it puts us in a position to really think through, reconsider, or reevaluate our consequence plan, our parenting plan. When we really understand our kids, we get to show up for them in a different way. And I know that that probably sounds more challenging, more overwhelming, but when you start to really understand what your kids need, it becomes simple. It becomes freeing, because it's not this fight against between my energy and their energy. It's me making decisions to honor their energy and to really help them feel more aligned with who they are. And when we can do that for our kids, then we don't get so much resistance. We don't get pushback. We don't get so many behaviors, because the behaviors, many of those behaviors come from this disconnect between I have this drive in me that is encouraging me to do things this way, but then I'm getting this feedback from these adults in my life that I love, that that's wrong and that I shouldn't do that. Well, imagine what that feels like, because we've all been there, right? Our parents didn't know this about us. And so we too got feedback. And some of us became more reactive as kids, and some of us shut down. Some of us took on behaviors to create safety in our own nervous system at a very young age. Many of us became people pleasers. And I think about, right, like I know that my dad was doing the very best that he could in honoring me and showing up for me and my brother, but he didn't know this about us. And I quickly developed a personality of being a people pleaser. And I don't know how old I was when that started, but when I look back over my childhood, I think that I quickly decided that my nervous system was safest if I made sure that I was the best behaved that I could be so that there was peace around me. It's actually my value in my human design is the gate of peace. And if you knew me and interacted with me, you'd see that, you'd know that creating peace, having peace, I will go to such extremes to avoid conflict, to create peace, to maintain stability wherever I can, because it's what I value at an energetic core. So, and now that's something that I'm trying to figure out, like what matters to me versus what decisions do I make to keep everybody else happy. So, back to this idea about when we yell at our kids, it has the power to give our kids feedback that it's not safe or okay to be who they are, versus giving them feedback or support or encouragement within boundaries, of course, right? Like, I'm not at all suggesting that we let our kids be unsafe, but what if our kids who need to explore, to learn, and to grow, what if we understood that about them and could give them safe parameters to do that within, instead of giving them feedback about they need to use their words or they need to ask first, or, whatever those words are that are in your vocabulary. What if we could change that in the way that we were parenting? I think that having human design is a very powerful way to do that. But that isn't all of it, right? When I think about these concepts, I think that we have this ability to really influence in a good way and not such a good way, influence our kids' resiliency. I've learned through the work of Dr. Karen Parker that she really uses the 9 resiliency keys as a foundational framework in a lot of the work that she does. And now I do too. And when I think about as we're raising our kids and how incredibly powerful those 9 resiliency keys are, they're things like lovability and self-worth and empowerment and decisiveness and authenticity. That's just a few of them. But when our kids are little, we have the power to build up those resiliency keys for our kids in the feedback that we give them, in the way that we honor them, and we also have the power to break those down, and we have the power to give our kids feedback that may cause them to question their lovability, may cause them to question their value. When we understand what our kids really need, we help them make better decisions that are aligned with them. We help them feel safe and okay to be their authentic selves. And when we don't understand these things about our kids, then we have the power to do the opposite, to cause our kids to hide, to cause our kids to make decisions from their conditioned mind instead of trusting the innate wisdom of their body. So yelling at our kids isn't just a way to correct behaviors. It has the power to do that, but at such an extreme cost for the well-being of our kids, the resiliency of our kids. And I know I hear over and over and over again from well-meaning other parents who will say, "Well, I was yelled at and I turned out just fine." And I challenge that statement because I think that we are currently, I think a couple of things. I think we're currently living in a society where many people feel like they're doing just fine. But what if what you perceive as just fine is really only 20% joy or even less? What if what you call just fine, what you've settled into as the best you think it can get for you, is really nowhere near the level of joy and happiness and empowerment and value and lovability that you could feel? I teach a class every week at this lovely addictions recovery unit. And everybody there has had struggles in their life that have led them to be at that facility. But I learned so much about humanity and the human experience in talking with and hearing the stories of the people who are there. And across the board, those who are, feel safe enough to share across the board, self-worth and lovability are at the top of the list of things that are causing so many other issues, including anxiety and depression and addiction. And I hear those stories and can look back without even knowing, exactly how their parents raised them. Although sometimes I do hear stories, but I can look back and trace that back to parents giving kids feedback that caused them to question whether or not it was safe or okay to be who they were. And I don't want that for your kids. I don't want that for your grandkids. I don't want that for any future generations. And I think that we have the power to change that. And I also, back to saying that, I hear time and time again, like when I was your age, my parents yelled at me and I turned out all right. And, I don't get to decide how all right you are. You get to decide that. But I also know that in the current energy that we're in today, our kids need different from us than we needed from our parents and different than our parents needed from their parents. Our energetic climate is changing. We're moving out of this energetic space of systems and structures and routines and outside authority. And we're moving into this energy of inner authority and being able to trust ourselves. We're moving into this energy where we need to be tapped into our own inner knowing and not rely so heavily on somebody outside of us to tell us what we need to be happy. And when our kids are little, when we are able to help support our kids in making decisions that are aligned with their bodies, with their energetic needs, instead of teaching our kids how to make decisions that make you happy and make grandpa happy and make dad happy and make their teachers happy. When that's what we're teaching our kids, they lose touch with what's right for them. And then they become adults who don't know how to make decisions that are right for them, which I think many of us are in that space. So, what in the heck do we do about this? Right? Because this isn't the end of the story. And we have the power as parents, as grandparents, as aunts or uncles, we have the power to change this story for ourselves and for our kids anywhere along the path. Whether your kids are 2 or 22, it doesn't matter. Because when we're losing our cool with our kids, we're teaching them that self-care comes later, that I myself don't matter enough to take care of myself. And that means that sometimes I'm going to lose my cool because I didn't take care of myself. And I don't ever want our kids to get a message that it is their fault that I lost my cool. Because if we're being super honest, it is never the kid's fault that we lost our cool. We will quickly jump to blaming our poor control. We will quickly jump to blaming that on the kids, right? Like, well, I wouldn't yell at you if you would just listen. But it's not their fault that you're yelling. It is never the kid's fault that you're yelling. That is on you. That is your responsibility to take care of your own needs. But we quickly jump there. We quickly jump to if the kids would just do dot, 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 then I wouldn't lose my cool. And then not only in our words, but in our actions, we're teaching our kids that it's your fault. And we're teaching our kids what self-care does not look like. So that very first step in changing this generational cycle, the first step really is in prioritizing self-care. And I don't think that I can emphasize that enough, but taking care of you is not selfish. It has to come first. You know, the analogy of flying on an airplane, right? Like every time you fly, they go through the safety protocol and they always say you must put on your own oxygen mask first because you can't save anybody else if you yourself are, perishing. And I'm not saying your kids need to be saved, but we are not in a position to do the work that we need to do to break these generations of cycles. We're not going to be in a position to do that unless we've first taken care of us. So that has to come first. We have to create a routine that is sustainable, that doesn't just pour a little bit into our cup. We have to create a routine that fills your cup. And I have no idea what that looks like for you. For some of us, well, no, that's not true. There are keys in your design, your human design, to show you what will fill your cup. I think that we are conditioned or trained or taught that there are certain ways to fill your cup. Like, oh, go get a massage or, go out on a coffee date with friends. But we're all so different. We all have such very different energetic needs. The way that I fill my cup as a 2-5 profile is probably very different than you might fill your cup if, for example, you're a 1-3 profile or a 5-1 profile or some other profile. My energetic needs are different than yours. And so understanding your design, I'm going to keep going back there, but it's so key to knowing what you need to do to really actually fill your cup so that it's overflowing. So that when the kids are misbehaving, when the kids are doing things that drive you nuts, you can respond, not react because you have an empty cup. So that self-care comes first. Then I think and the next necessary step and the self-care and um, the next step of regulation, it's not sequential, right? I think that it is a dance between the two of them and doing what works right for you. But self-care is essential, and so is nervous system regulation. Because all these things that I've shared with you here today in this episode, I'm talking to your brain, your prefrontal cortex, which is involved in thinking and reasoning and problem solving and figuring things out and making plans. It's brilliant at that. But your nervous system has a very specific job. And when it detects danger, when that fear response is activated, then it takes over. It shuts down your prefrontal cortex, the one that knows that you're not supposed to yell at your kids because of all of the things that I just shared and many other things that I didn't share in this episode. But your prefrontal cortex knows all that. It knows what to do and it knows why to do it. And it knows the consequences if you don't do it. I get that. Your nervous system, when your fear is triggered, will take over. There's so many things that can trigger that fear response. For some of us, it can be fear of abandonment by our kids, right? What if I push too hard with my kids and they don't love me anymore, or they leave me, or they decide they want to move in with the other parent? Sometimes with our kids, it can be fear of inadequacy, that questioning whether or not I'm good enough. And if I don't keep my kids in control, then somebody outside of me will perceive that I'm not a good enough parent. That fear of inadequacy can be a really strong one. Or a fear, um, fear of not being loved, fear of, there are so many different fears that can trigger that fear response in us. It can also be a fear of repeating the past can cause us to repeat the past, right? We can have such a strong fear. I have this fear of saying stupid things. And when I have that fear that, oh my gosh, don't say this, don't say this, don't say this, and then I say it, right? But that fear of repeating the past, I think really works the same that when we're so afraid that we're gonna, the words of our mother are gonna come out of our mouth, then they do. Because we've called them in. We've invited that energy, those words, we've invited it in. Or the fear of the future. I know that's a huge one for parents that can create a fear response in us, right? If I don't control the kids now, then our minds, if the fear of the future is part of our design, then our minds can quickly go into this spiral of all of the horrible things that can happen if I don't control my toddler and make sure they pick up their toys now that they threw on the floor, right? It seems so illogical, but our mind goes there, right? If I don't make sure that they pick up their toys now, then when they're an adult, they're never going to get a job and they're never going to get married and nobody's going to want to stay with them because they won't pick up their blocks, right? That's where our mind goes. It's so illogical, but so is the brainstem, right? So is that fear response. It isn't logical. There's nothing logical about it. It's just a fear response. And when that happens, when our nervous system is in control of the moment and our kids have thrown their toys on the floor, and our nervous system is the one that's doing our thinking for us, and I put thinking in air quotes because it doesn't think, right? Our nervous system just reacts. When our nervous system is the one that's doing the thinking in the moment, when our kids throw the toys on the floor, then we react out of old patterns. We react out of old, old fears or current fears, perceived fears. We react without thinking. And so the solution to that isn't learning more strategies. It isn't learning more about the consequences to us if we yell at our kids, although it's helpful to know that, to have something to pull from. But the solution is regulating your nervous system. And there are all kinds of ways that you can do that. There's breath work, there's yoga, meditation. I personally use EFT tapping with myself and with my clients because I find it so quick and powerful to do. There's also things like the thymus hold, EMDR, informed tapping. There's so many different ways that you can regulate your nervous system, not only before the moments, but also in the moment, right? Your child just threw all their blocks on the floor and immediately, oh, excuse me, immediately you go into this reactive mode and you're ready to yell. There are things that you can do in that moment to regulate your nervous system to create a little bit of space between what they did and how you respond instead of react. But when we're not regulating our nervous system, then it goes from child behavior to our nervous system reacting, and then we're in this regret mode, right? We lost our cool with our kids again, and then we regret or feel bad that we yelled at them again, even though we knew we weren't supposed to, even though we knew that we were trying to stop yelling at them, we do it again anyways, because we didn't do the work to fill our cup and we didn't do the work to regulate our nervous system. This this right here, this sequence of events, really understanding our kids' energetic needs and showing up for them differently, filling our own cup, understanding our own energetic needs, and regulating our nervous system are really key, powerful steps to breaking generational cycles of losing our cool with our kids. And still, even when we follow the most perfect formula, we're still human, and breaking cycles is hard work. It takes intentional decision making and intentional work. And sometimes you're still going to lose your cool because you're human. And this losing your cool is also a really powerful place to to create bonds with your kids, but it has to be meaningful, right? We can't lose our cool, scream at our kids, and repair and tell them how very sorry we are, and then do it again the next time that they throw their blocks on the floor, right? If we are making a decision to repair, then we must do the work to repair ourselves, to repair our own nervous system so we don't keep going through that cycle. Because we can only apologize so many times before the kids are like, yeah, right, great apology, mom, but you're still losing your cool, so I don't actually believe your apology. So, this is the work that we get to do to help change the path for our kids, to get them back on to their path, is by really having this awareness about what we get to control and having this awareness about how we can change this path for ourselves, for our kids, for our grandkids. We get to do this work. Nobody else is going to do it for you. Nobody's going to come swoop in and, um, change the way that you're reacting to your kids. You get to do that. Of course, if you're stuck and you've tried the things, you've been listening, you've been doing the work and it's not changing, I'd love to help you with that. This really is the work that I do, is help parents to break these cycles that they're just fed up with and know that they want different for their family. So, if you feel called to do so, I would love to connect with you on a connection clarity call. It's a free consult where I walk you through an exercise and really help you identify what are those things that are really triggering you. And then I share with you how I can help you with that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. I obviously am a little bit fired up about yelling at our kids and that we've got to change this for our kids. We have to change it. Our kids aren't going to change it for us, right? Or at least I don't want to leave this for them to try to figure out how to fix for their kids, right? So that is all for this episode. It was so lovely sharing this concept with you. And until next time, be well.